Hello, we'd like to welcome you to this Contact a Family webinar. At the beginning, we'd just like to say if there are any technical hitches, please can you bear with us. We were meant to have a Contact a Family representative with us here this morning to help us with any technical problems, but unfortunately due to problems on trains, she's not here. So we're working remotely and on our own. So please do bear with us if anything goes wrong in terms of technical issues. We will try and deal with it as soon as possible. There's quite a few attendees, so it's not practical for us to take questions during the session, so you'll be muted throughout. And if at any point you have any questions, please use the icon on the GoToWebinar tool on your screen, and that will help you type in a question into the text box, and that will be sent to the administrator who will send it through to us. We will try and answer as many questions as we can at the end of the session, but if we can't answer them all, we will make sure that they are answered and sent out to all of the attendees afterwards. We do know that there's quite a lot of slides that we're going to be going through in this session, and it may take longer than the hour that's been allocated. The session is being recorded, so if you do have to leave after the hour, then you will be able to catch up on all of the additional slides afterwards. If there's sorry, I think I've already covered that. At the end of the webinar, there'll be a short questionnaire as well, and if you could complete that, that would be useful because that will assist us with future training events. Okay, so to introduce ourselves, my name's Sharon Smith, and I'm a Contact a Family associate and also deliver some training for forums and Contact a Family. I'm the previous chair of the Hampshire Parent Carer Network. I was involved with the forum for about 3 years, and I've also got with me Gail Bedding, and I'll allow her to introduce herself.
Good morning, or I should say good afternoon now. My name is Gail Bedding, and as Sharon said, I am now the, I'm now the CEO of Hampshire Parent Carer Network, but I was the co-chair with Sharon for about 6 to 9 months, and then I became the chair, and then Hampshire Parent Carer Network became a charity or a CIO, which we'll explain a bit more in detail later, so I'm now become the CEO after an interview process that we went through.
Okay, so we're going to do this presentation together. I am going to do most of the training session, and Gail will be adding some bits in from a forum perspective as we go through. And when we come to the questions at the end, we will both jointly answer those. So the purpose of the session, not necessarily in this order, but we're going to be looking at some myth busting, looking at accountability, decision making, governance, some practical aspects, what it actually looks like in reality, and looking at legal structures and responsibilities of particular forum and committee members. What we won't be looking at today is the treasurer role, because there's been a recent Contact a Family webinar on that, which is still available on the Contact a Family website if you want to find out more about the treasurer role. Okay, so some common assumptions. One of the common assumptions, certainly that I heard as a chair, and I think other forums have faced as well, is firstly that the chair is in charge and makes all the decisions. And from some forums' perspectives, that's because that's the perception the chair wants to give, and in others it's because people feel that they don't necessarily have the knowledge or the ability to either challenge the chair or to actually help with the decision making. The assumptions as well follow, therefore, that the chair, treasurer and secretary do all the work, that everything has to be agreed by the chair before anything's done, and if the chair doesn't agree, that means that things can't go ahead. And therefore the role of the committee is seen just as rubber stamping, and that the chair can actually veto decisions. None of those are true, so we want to immediately say that's not actually the way that it should run in a forum. It shouldn't be a dictatorship. The person who's in the role of the chair is not in charge, and they're not the sole decision maker. Effective decision making within the forum requires the forum to have a governance structure and policies in place, and that will determine how you run your forum. And that governance structure and the policies need to be jointly agreed by the committee members. So this session will look at some of those things that the forum should consider, but it's not extensive because we only have an hour to go through lots of information, and we certainly couldn't share all of our learning in an hour, but we'll give it a good shot.
I would also say that there's no right way to do this. Every parent-carer forum is run in a different way, with different ideas, different personalities, and I think that we just have to be mindful that we are not right about everything we're saying today. There are other ways of doing things.
And Hampshire Parent Carer Network have got various sample documents that I'm sure we can make available to Contact a Family if forums want to see them. Otherwise, the Contact a Family regional contacts also have sample documents and they can get hold of those for you as well. So this is what you need to keep in mind at all times. You're there to represent the parent carers in your local area, and it's not just about what the chair wants to do. And that means that the forum needs to work together to develop and run an organisation that can represent those parents' views in order to ultimately improve outcomes for children and young people in the local area. There's additional accountability, of course, to your funding organisations, whether that's Contact Family and the Department for Education, or your local authority, or any other funding that you may have secured for your forum. And therefore, it's really important that the Parent Carer Forum is open and accountable to all of its members and any partners, funders, and anybody really who has an interest in the work that you're doing. So it's important that all of your documentation, such as governing documents, annual reports, your accounts, are ideally published online if you've got a website, and also potentially on social media. And also that you as a forum are willing to answer any questions honestly and openly about the work that you're doing, particularly as it's well known that forums are funded by the Department for Education, so it's seen as taxpayers' money that you're using, so you need to be able to justify how you're spending that money to improve outcomes in the local area. So one of the first things that needs to be considered is the legal structure that you're going to take. And that will determine then the kind of governing document that you're going to have and also who you need to report to each year. And there are a number of options that are available to forums, and really it needs to be down to your forum to explore each of these options and decide what's right for your local area and what's right for your own individual forum's aims. So we've got there a list of them. There's the unincorporated association, an incorporated association, so I'll put my teeth in, which is basically where there is a governing document that regulates what the organisation is going to do. Charitable incorporated organisation, which is a relatively new form of charity, which requires less reporting and it's a slightly easier way of getting the charity status. Community interest company, which is also known as a KIC, or a limited company.
A Hampshire Parent Carer Network decided about a year and a half ago to change their structure and the way they did things, and it was before my time in fact, and they looked into very different options and the best way for Hampshire Parent Carer Network to be run, and in the end they decided on the charitable incorporated organisation. And when I came on board last year, I looked into it myself because I wasn't really sure why they had done this. I came out at the end of it having spoken to other parent carer forums who'd gone down this route and looked into what it meant to us as an organisation, and came out thinking, yes, this is the right way to go, and us as an organisation was doing the right thing. We used a solicitor to help us go through the whole process, and although it took quite a while, probably about a year, we eventually became a charity earlier this year. And for us as an organisation, it's meant that we are more secure. The local authority are happier because their money is more protected, and it has meant though that we have had to restructure ourselves as an organisation, which again we can come on to later. But I certainly feel that we have done the right thing for our Parent Carer Forum, and we're now going through things in the right way. But it also means that with less statutory funding in the future, as we all know things are changing drastically throughout the country, it means that we can dip into other pots of money, and that's really what we're looking for the future, that we're not just tied to the local authority pot and the DFE pot of money.
And one of the reasons that we chose a charity or a charitable incorporated organisation rather than a community interest company or a limited company was because we felt that we didn't want to actually become a forum that was offering services. Some forums will provide services that they actually charge out to the local authority or to other organisations locally, and for those it would potentially be better for them to be a KIC or a limited company. But we were very clear that for our forum we wanted to make sure that we were purely a participation organisation and that we didn't want to go on and develop services that we would then be charging out for. So we weren't going to actually be running a business. So this just tells you a little bit about where you need to then be registered. I'll leave you to read this at a later stage, but it just tells you where different types of legal structure need to actually report to. So for instance, Hampshire Parent Carer Network obviously has to make a report each year to the Charity Commission, just to say how we've been meeting our objects and also to present our accounts as well. Just a quick word really about unincorporated associations. There are some forums that still do not have a legal structure to them but are unincorporated. And really this is putting yourselves potentially a little bit of risk, because as an association it's not recognised in law and as an entity in itself. So that means each of the individual committee members are responsible for any of the money and also any decisions that you make. We certainly at HPCN, we got a constitution very, very quickly to make sure that we were at least a incorporated association, so we had some level of protection, but then we wanted to seek further protection by becoming a charity. We wanted to make sure that any of our committee members wouldn't be liable for anything that we did wrong. Hopefully we wouldn't make mistakes, but we are all human and learning, and we wanted to make sure we protected people as much as possible. So we would strongly recommend that forums don't stay as an unincorporated association, but actually look at the options where it would give the forum a legal entity and protects its committee members.
I'd also add in here as well that as a forum we've spoken to some of the voluntary organisations within Hampshire, and they have given us a lot of advice and a lot of help, and are still doing now, which is really helpful. You know, we don't know everything and we're certainly learning as we're going, so do ask your voluntary organisations within your local authority to help you.
So every forum should have, ideally, a governing document that outlines its governance structure and also policies. And as we said earlier, this will potentially depend on what type of organisation structure you have. HPCN has got governing document, and I think it has changed every single year that we've had an AGM, because new things arise. So we've added things, and certainly when we became a CIO, that also all of our governance and our governing documents changed. But just as a typical example, things that should really go in there would be details of what the forum's legal structure are, details outlining membership of the Parent Carer Forum. So this may determine if there's particular areas, geographical areas, or ages of children that you're covering, whether it's all parent carers in your local area. Should be information in there about the forum's officers and committee structure, and also, really importantly, how people are elected or appointed into roles, so that it is clear and open as to how those people who are representing parents in the local area are elected and appointed. And that, if there are elections to be held, details of how those elections are held, how people can put themselves forward for that, how frequent they are, etc., should also be in there. You should have details in there of how many committee meetings you're going to hold each year, so you have a minimum number in there. Also to talk about the annual general meeting and the extraordinary general meetings and instances in which they may be called. It's important also to include how decisions are made and whether there are any delegated responsibilities either to the officers of the committee or any subcommittees, and also to talk about voting rights. Again, who can actually vote on decisions and which decisions require voting, and you may find that there are some things where you say all members would vote on something, and others you may say it's an officer's vote on those decisions, and all of that needs to go in the governing documents. And finally, you should really have something in there that talks about how decisions can be questioned or appealed by members. So if there are people who are not on the committee but who want to question what the committee are doing and how you're representing their views, there needs to be a way for them to actually appeal that or to question the actions that are being taken on their behalf. And this ties back into the extraordinary general meetings, because quite often it would be that would be the route for them to actually question what's happening in the forum. There are other policies you may wish to develop as well, and certainly this is not a comprehensive list. In fact, it's probably not even a list of everything that HPCN have. And again, this will change and develop over time. We certainly found that we started off with a number of governing documents that we thought we needed, and then over time situations would arise and we realised actually we don't have a policy that talks about that, so we can't go back and check what we've already agreed we would do in that situation. And then over time we have developed more and more policies, such as complaints policy, code of conduct, confidentiality, etc. If you are going to be employing staff, there is a whole realm of policies that you would need to be developing relating to employment of staff, and that would include things such as grievance, sickness, holiday policies, use of IT, confidentiality, etc. And as Gail said, it would be worth getting some legal advice on that rather than actually developing those yourself. And it's important that you don't just develop a pile of documents and a governance document and policies and then put them in a cupboard. It's important that everybody on the committee has a copy of those documents and knows how to access them, and also that they understand what they mean and what their implication is for that person's individual role. And it's good practice, therefore, that when somebody's handing over a role to somebody else, that those documents are shared with the new members. And they should also really be made available for your membership. So again, if you have a website, it's good practice to have a copy of them on your website so that people can actually see how the forum works and operates and the rules of membership. So every forum should have a governing body, not just a chair, not just a dictator. And that governing body are the people who actually run the forum, and they are often referred to as a management committee or committee, steering group. The name doesn't really matter, but it's important that that role exists, and there are a group of people committed to running the forum. Again, your forum's legal structure may determine what that group is called, and as Gail said, they have a board of trustees now at HPCN. A company would have a board of directors. Some forums have a host organisation who apply for and hold the grant for them, and they may also obviously be involved in that running of the forum, but the forum should still have a group of parents who are the ones making the decisions about how the group spends its money and what activities are undertaken. It's not for the host organisation to be dictating that. So the committee's role is to ensure that the forum basically does what it's meant to do, which is represent the voice of parents locally, and also to make sure that money doesn't run out, you don't get into debt, and that any terms of any grant agreements are met, and also that basically the forum operates within the law and doesn't do anything illegal. The committee is ultimately accountable for everything that the forum does, including its spending and its activities. So in practical terms, the committee could potentially be looking at developing and agreeing a strategic plan which will guide and direct all the activities of the forum. And it's important there to actually be proactive as well as to be reactive. So it's not just looking at things that, for instance, the local authority are coming and saying we need representation for, but also looking and saying what do we as parents want to do, what do we want to achieve, what changes do we want to see, whether that's changes in how the forum is actually run or changes in outcomes for children locally. So it's important to set aside some time, and that time can actually be facilitated by outside people. And certainly that's what we have done in the past with HPCN, to make sure that we actually have some set time to actually focus our energies on developing our plans. Then it's the case of managing the implementation of the activities and also, really importantly, monitoring the effectiveness. no point doing activities and then not looking back afterwards and saying, did it achieve what we wanted to do? And it's also responsible for the recruitment, support, training and development of all volunteers. And that's the committee and parent representatives. And this point at the bottom is one that I've said to Gail over and over again. Succession planning is key to the forum's long-term survival. Forums shouldn't rely on one or two people, and they should make sure that they're always thinking ahead to moving on to the next group of committee members and the next chair.
Yeah, not just a bottle of wine and over a meeting. No, that is really important, and already I'm thinking about the future, who is involved at the moment, who could be involved, and just keeping my eyes open for the right person.
So the management committee and board must make sure that the forum understands and complies with its own governing document and any contracts and laws and regulatory bodies. So there's a whole list here, and again there's probably more than this, but I didn't want to scare you all too much. Now, if you're employing members of staff, then the committee is essentially the employer. And that means that the committee must make sure that those appropriate policies and procedures are put in place for the staff. And that includes line management, performance reviews, tax, national insurance. And this can be a massive time commitment. Certainly when we started to take on staff for HPCN, we underestimated how much additional time and responsibility it was going to take, particularly if issues arise in terms of someone's employment, if performance is not at the level that you would hope, or if other issues arise. And I'll let Gail talk about that in a second in terms of HPCN's experience. But also another point that is really important to notice is that forums, if they're employing staff, need to also be aware of the new legislation relating to pensions, and that every employer in the UK must put certain staff into a pension scheme, and between 2016 and 2018 that legal requirement will be coming into place. I've put a link on the presentation there for people to be able to go and find out more information, but it's something that I would suggest that professional advice from maybe a HR expert would be useful.
And that's exactly what we did. When we became a CIO last year, or earlier this year, we knew that we couldn't cover all the HR issues that were going to be looked at. None of us were HR professionals, and therefore we were completely out of our comfort zone. So we looked locally and we found a HR consultant who had a small company not far from the centre of Hampshire. And we took her on board, and she's been an absolute godsend. She's been brilliant. She is now our HR consultant. We have her on a retainer, monthly retainer, and we review that every 6 months to decide whether we still need her or not. But certainly changing from where we were into a CIO, it meant that she would help us with the sad redundancies we had to do, looking at our new structure, looking at how the trustees work with the new management team. She's looking at job descriptions, contracts, and more importantly, as Sharon said, she's looking now at the pension schemes for the future. And we've decided as an organisation that all our employees will have the pension scheme, obviously if they are earning the money that they should be, but she's advising us on that. You know, we don't know all of that information, and therefore using her really has been an asset to the organisation. So do look at that as an alternative. And also that really works as well with payroll and the finances as well. If you're not experts in this area, then make sure you find somebody that is. It might mean a small cost, but it certainly be worth your while doing that so that you don't get into any mess.
Okay, so you probably feel now that you want to just run away, and that this all sounds really scary and huge amount of responsibility. But please don't log off this webinar and run away from us, because you're not alone. Firstly, you're not alone in terms of feeling like that, and I know certainly there were times when I was chair of Hampshire Parent Carer Network and I felt that everything was really overwhelming. So certainly if you're feeling like that, then others will be feeling the same. But also most importantly, I think, you're not alone in that there is lots of help and support available to you. Gail's already talked about the fact that HPCN has used a HR advisor and also a solicitor in terms of our legal structure. But there is also support from other forums. your contact to family training, contact to family associates, contact to family regional team, national network and their regional meetings, and just that informal network really between other forums and other chairs is really important.
I remember leaving a meeting about 9 months ago, sitting in the car thinking, I just wish I knew more. I can't wait for it to be 6 months further on. And it is 6 months further on, and I know now so much more than I did, not just about running the forum, but also what's going on in the bigger wide world of SEN and health, and it is so much better. So give it time, you will get there, but use the people around you. And one of the biggest helps I found were actually other parent-carer forums. So I made calls, I made phone calls, I spoke to friends I'd made next door, West Sussex, Surrey, Portsmouth, and in fact we now as a little organisation have set up our own our own Facebook page, and there's a group of forums now who just bounce ideas off each other. I know that that's happening nationally anyway, but actually because we're all quite local, we meet now every 2 months, and we just sit down and just talk about what we're up to and what we're doing, and some of the ideas are great, and also supporting each other, which is so key, personally as well as professionally, and I think that's really really key. I don't feel alone. I also have a fantastic committee around me, great trustees and a management team now, and we just bounce ideas off each other, and I certainly wouldn't be doing this if I didn't have them to help me.
Okay, so decision-making responsibility, as Gail said, really that sits with the forum committee, whether that's a steering group, a management committee or a board. It's possible that the chair may have a casting vote if there's an even number of votes cast for and against an item, but that will depend on what you've put into your governance document. The chair doesn't have the powers to make decisions on their own unless the power has been delegated to them to do so by the committee. And the committee can also delegate powers to subcommittees as well. And that doesn't have to be subcommittees of people who are on the main committee. It could be that there are committees set up for specific projects or for particular pieces of work in different regions. Certainly in Hampshire, we're a large county and we've set up smaller subgroups over time for specific projects. It's important, though, that any decisions that are made, particularly in terms of delegation of responsibility, are recorded in the minutes of the meetings, and that minutes are checked to make sure that decisions have been recorded properly. So, who is that committee? Who are the people that are going to be working together to run the forum? Well, again, that really depends on your governing document and also your legal status and how you're set up. It could be that you would say that you only want it to be parent carers from your local area. But others, other forums, and certainly again with CIO and KICS, will often say, actually, we want to have somebody who's got some professional knowledge, for instance, a HR advisor or somebody that has links with the wider community. And so it's potentially, you could put into your governing document that you would have up to a certain number of people who aren't necessarily parent carers of people and children and young people with disabilities and special needs. Maybe that actually your committee changes on a regular basis depending on who has time to turn up, and there can be an informal reference group that's set up, and often that's something that happens where there's a host organisation such as a voluntary sector organisation holding your grant. But there can be a disadvantage there in that there's not necessarily any consistency in planning and decision making, and the danger there is then that that voluntary sector organisation will be taking the lead on deciding what your strategy is and how to make decisions. And we've already talked about the fact you can co-opt other people. Again, HPCN had it written into our old constitution that we could co-opt up to 3 people if we felt that there was particular expertise that we wanted.
I'd say that what's key to all of this is that the reason we get involved with this in the first place is because some of us do have various issues and knowledge, but I think we have to remember that becoming a representative when you're going into the local authority, for example, is you're taking the bigger picture, you're not taking your own personal problems with you. It helps obviously to have the knowledge that you gain for your own personal development, but at the same time you are representing the larger community, ages and disability across your local authority. But I think what's important is that you have the right people attending the right area of meeting, for example, but also not scaring people away. That some people really can't give the time that perhaps I do or Sharon did, becoming the chair, because they don't have that time or that energy. And I think you have to recognise that to make sure that you're not scaring them away, actually, and recognising what their skills are. So we have somebody, for example, that does social media, we have somebody who does the finance, we have somebody who's really organised and is really good on doing project work, and it just means that those bits of work are then taken off responsibility of myself and the other members of the team, but it means that the work is shared out, and only those people that are doing those bits of work know how much time they have. So don't force people to do things they don't want to do, because they will run a mile.
So who are the committee? Anybody who's willing to give some time, and as Gail said, that can be that somebody says, actually, I have 20 minutes a week and I'll help you with your Facebook page. Or it could be somebody who says, actually, I'm going to take 6 weeks out from something, and I have some time that I want to commit to running a particular project for you. Or it could be somebody who says, I've got half a day a week. And it will vary, and it will vary at different times, and people will come and go depending on what they're able to do and what they're able to commit.
I'd also like to say here as well, a lot of this depends on what finances you have as an organisation, what sort of grant you get from your local authority, and whether you're able to perhaps offer a project fee for people to help you on certain bits of work, and it just helps sometimes to know that you can actually pay somebody to perhaps to do something. And I know there's lots of discussions have been going on nationally about who gets paid and who shouldn't, and again, that is very dependent on what money you have as an organisation. But even if it's just the odd hour here and there to look at a paper or look at a document, then that can help some members of your committee to actually do some work for you.
And it's important as well that the people that you actually take onto the committee understand that they're taking on a role that's about running the forum rather than directly around parent participation. So you're needing to find people who are willing to commit time not only to their own personal project or to their own child's needs, but people who actually understand the value of the forum and want to be involved with running that. And it's worth, as part of your planning each year, is actually looking at what are the activities we're going to be doing in the coming year and how well placed are we to actually achieve those goals. And you may therefore identify, well, we're planning on running a big event. It'd be useful if we could find somebody who's got some events experience, or we're looking to do a project with schools. It would be useful if we could find somebody who has either worked in schools or knows the education system well, for instance. So it's worth looking ahead and thinking about who you might want on your committee at a particular time and what skills and knowledge they might have.
And I think also it's identifying the right person to do the right job, as Sharon said, but you want to make sure that if you've got a parent going into a local authority meeting, that they are the right person. They're not there shouting and screaming and causing a scene. They're there to work alongside and advise and to participate. And I think certainly Hampshire Parent Carer Network have developed a great relationship now with the local authority and are being invited onto more and more work streams because of our attitude and the way we work alongside them. We also do put our point of view forward very strongly, and they are now recognising that, but we have to make sure that the right people are chosen for the right work streams. And I personally go out and meet those people beforehand, before we say, would you like to come on board? And we have regional groups around Hampshire now, and our regional reps will perhaps help me identify the odd person here and there, and that makes it easier for me to go along to a meeting and meet them unofficially and just see that they are the right person to attend meetings. I think that's really key, certainly for us as an organisation now.
Okay, so in terms of your committee meetings, these should be held regularly, and it's important for you to make sure that are held at a convenient time and location for the committee. Something that we've certainly struggled with in Hampshire, given the size of the county, and that it can take almost 2 hours to get from the top of Hampshire to the bottom of Hampshire. So because of that, we've always felt strongly that travel expenses should be paid, and also we provide refreshments, particularly if it's going to be near to lunchtime. The
We've also actually set our meetings now for 2016, so we know exactly what times and dates our meetings are, so that people have plenty of time to commit to the year.
And also that means that you can publish those dates on your website as well, so your wider membership knows when your committee meetings are taking place, and if they want to put something on an agenda to be discussed, they can do so. So also when you're setting your committee meeting dates, it's important that the meetings have a purpose and that therefore the agenda will set that out. The agenda and any supporting papers should be sent out in plenty of time, and I would suggest at least a week. Certainly include a weekend in that time to allow committee members to read any papers in advance. This is particularly important if you're going to be doing things such as developing and signing off policies, because you need to make sure that people know what they're signing off. And I would say the same would apply as well to any finances that are being presented, so that people can come along to the committee meeting with any questions prepared. It's normally left to the Chair and Secretary to set the agenda, but any member of the committee can normally request that an item is added. And certainly in Hampshire, I think we've always said actually it's any member at all, any parent carer can add an item to be added onto the agenda, provided that they give 2 weeks' notice. So the Chair really should involve the committee in setting each agenda, but it will be finalised by the Chair and Secretary. And clear minutes need to be written to provide a record of everything that has been discussed at that meeting. And that's why it's useful to have a secretary role. But if you do not have a secretary, or if for any reason they're not there, then it's important that you actually nominate somebody else to take the minutes in their absence. And please can you make sure it's not the chair, because it's actually impossible to both chair a meeting and take the minutes of that meeting.
Hampshire Parent Carer Network actually have a clerk that we decided we would take on just for those meetings, and she comes in to take the minutes and to type them up for us and then to share.
This is just to give an idea of some of the things that would go onto an agenda. It should be acknowledged if there are any committee members who can't attend, and that should be recorded. And that's useful as well at the end of the year for you to be able to look back and see who attended which meetings. And you may have it written into your governance document that committee members need to attend a certain number of meetings, or you may have it written in that if they don't attend, say for instance 3 meetings in a row, that there'll be a discussion then as to whether they should remain on the committee or not. And that all needs to be in your governance document. You should review the minutes of the last meeting. They should be checked for accuracy, and also any actions should be reviewed. And they need to be agreed by the committee and ideally signed by the chair as a true copy of the previous meeting. There should be disclosure of any conflicts of interest. I will come on to talk about conflicts of interest later on in the presentation. And then really it's any other items, anything that you're going to be discussing, your activities, any planning that you have. And then at each meeting the Treasurer should make a report to basically say what the finances are, what money has been spent to date, what your budgets are, and how you plan to actually spend the money for the rest of the year.
What we were finding is that the finances were discussed at the end of the meeting, and actually they are really key to how your parent carer forum is run. So what we've done now is that we've made sure that at the beginning of every meeting we make finances as #1 item, so to make sure we get through it, because it is the most important part of your organisation.
And what I would also say on that note is, in terms of when you're developing your agenda, is to make sure firstly that your most important things are put at the beginning. Also is to make sure that you allow time in each agenda to look at some of those bigger strategic decisions and don't just get bogged down in the day-to-day running of the forum. And a timed agenda can help as well to make sure that you can actually stay on track. So conflicts of interest. At any time there may be conflicts of interest that arise for committee members, and it's important really to have a conflicts of interest policy and register, and that everybody's given the opportunity to declare any conflicts at a meeting. And it could be as simple as the fact that, as an example, my husband is a bookseller, and it may be that we're discussing an event where we want to hand out some free books, so where's the best place to buy those books? It would be that I shouldn't be involved in that discussion because there's a potential conflict that therefore my husband may get that sale of books. So I would have to declare at the beginning of that meeting that I had a conflict there. And it would be therefore that that person would not be able to be involved in any of those discussions or decision making relating to any items where they have a conflict. And you may, depending on what it is, you may actually ask them to leave the room and have some confidential minutes that they can't see. And that's particularly the case if you're looking to employ people on the committee. So if, for instance, you've decided to actually take on a new role and there's people who may apply for that job, then it's important they're not involved in any of the discussions around that or any discussions around salaries and things like that. Useful for you to actually develop some role descriptions so that everybody within the committee knows what they do and also what's expected of them and also the responsibilities, their delegated responsibilities. So what can they do on their own and what do they need to go back to the committee for? And what you may do on some of these roles is actually, so for instance on an events role, you may allocate particular budgets to that events role and say, provided that you don't go above, let's say, £1,000 for this event, then you can go and spend that money. But that all needs to be documented. These are just some possible roles. Certainly I think we've got most or had most of these in Hampshire Parent Carer Network. But again, over time they've changed and at times we've had one chair and 2 vice chairs, then we've had 2 co-chairs and no vice chairs. And at different times it depends really on the needs of the forum at any given time. So the role of the chair. There's 4 main areas that fall into the role of the chair. The first one we've already talked a little bit about, which is chairing the meetings. But secondly, it's about pulling that committee together to work as a team. Having that strategic overview of the work that the group is doing and knowing really what is happening within the forum and who's doing what. And finally, being the main contact person for the organisation, though that's only if that's been delegated to them. Some forums actually have somebody else who's a named contact, whether that's a named contact for the local authority or a named contact for parents. So that doesn't have to be the case. Chairing meetings. The most important thing to do when you're going to be chairing a meeting is know what it is that you're actually wanting to achieve from that meeting. And that requires you to put some time aside to actually plan and think about the meeting in advance. And we've already talked about preparing an agenda. And you need to make sure as part of that that you actually get through all of the necessary business. So that means potentially having a timed agenda or actually saying, well, we've discussed this now, we're not getting anywhere with this, let's stop this discussion and let's either come to a decision on it or let's carry it forward to another meeting. So making sure that everybody in the room gets a chance to talk and that no one person dominates, and that includes the chair as well. Although the chair is actually leading the meeting, it shouldn't just be the chair talking at everybody for that whole committee meeting. And also making sure that clear decisions are reached. So the committee is clear on what has been decided, who's going to do it, when they're going to do it, and also what success looks like. And that that's all documented. And finally, that the meeting starts and finishes on time, which is really important, particularly for parents who've got lots of additional commitments. And then I say that and we'll probably overrun on this webinar, so I do apologise for that.
I'd like to say that during our committee meetings, which are now called trustee meetings, we do them from 10 to 2, and we include a sandwich lunch, and that also means that over lunch we can have a chat and get to know each other better. Now again, our time is so limited. I think it's important that we work as a team and do get to know each other. And this is what we do on a monthly basis, is have that extra bit of time to actually sit down and talk and get to know each other.
So committees work best if they work as a team, and it's important that the chair is part of that team, but not a dictator. It's not the chair's role to do all of the work or make all of the decisions. I think we're making that clear in this presentation, and it's important that the whole committee is involved in decision making and that people can take on whatever roles they feel comfortable with and the roles that they feel they can actually manage effectively, whether that's depending on their skills or the time that they have available. And the whole team needs to be involved in setting the agenda and also the dates and location of meetings. Okay, so this is the second role of the chair, an overview of the work. The day-to-day work of the group is really important, but it needs to be that there is somebody who's thinking about that bigger picture. And it's not up to the chair to actually decide which direction the forum is going to be going into, but to actually support the committee to work that out and to be looking at as well and evaluating how well the work is actually that you're currently doing is achieving the aims that you've already set yourselves. And it's useful, I've put here once a year, but actually potentially more than once a year, to have a discussion about the group's plans for the coming year and what are the main things you want to achieve. And that needs to be a team decision and a team discussion. And it should really be a regular item on your agenda for your committee meetings to discuss how well the work is that you're doing is going towards that and what the successes and challenges have been.
Obviously, for us now as a CIO, we have a board of trustees, and it is the board of trustees which is now has the chair, obviously, and they are the ones that look at the strategic forward motion of the forum. And myself as the CEO now will sit on that board, and obviously I will then do the action and get on with the work. But we will be reporting very closely together between myself, the CEO, and the chair of trustees.
There we go, point of contact. We've already covered this really. The chair is often the first point of contact for the local authority, but doesn't have to be. You could delegate that responsibility to somebody else. And in particular, we've found forums have actually delegated responsibility for talking to members and supporting parent representatives. And that could be a paid member of staff, or it could be a committee member who's willing to take that role on. Not everybody is as happy to receive telephone calls or emails, so it's worth finding out and making sure that the person is happy and comfortable to do that. And also, it's important that that person doesn't feel that they have to be on call 24/7, and also that they understand that any decisions need to be taken by the committee, so therefore often they can't actually give an answer on something but have to take it to the committee and get that consensus view.
And it's really important the local authority realise that too. We're not at their beck and call. We'll do everything in the time restraints that we have, and a lot of us are volunteers, and therefore we have to make sure that we can meet the needs of the parents as well as the local authority.
And then the chair can take on other responsibilities as well, but again, only if delegated by the committee. The chair should never make assumptions about the roles that they can take on, and they should certainly not cherry pick the best roles for themselves. Everything needs to be decided within the committee to get that consensus of opinion, and again, it should be recorded in the minutes. Okay, so the role of the secretary, also a really, really important role in the forum. And this role and the role description for the secretary again needs to be discussed and agreed with the committee, and it can be split into a number of different roles, and lots of forums do this, where they'll have a minutes secretary, an events organizer, a membership secretary, or it could just be one person takes on all of those responsibilities. And again, this is not everything that the secretary can do. It's just a list of things that they may. A key role, obviously, is taking minutes in meetings and also keeping files of past minutes and reports and having those available if anybody wants to look at them. Their role also is telling people when the next meeting is going to take place and also what it's about and preparing that agenda with the chair, and also looking at correspondence for the group as well and letting people know what correspondence has been sent out and received on behalf of the forum. And then these last two, keeping a record of membership and keeping a record of important phone numbers, that may be that you have a membership secretary or a committee member who actually looks after that instead, or again a paid admin member of staff. Okay, common problems when you're taking minutes. We've all been in meetings where everybody is talking and people are talking over each other and a decision seems to have been made, and then 10 minutes later it looks like you're going in a completely different direction. And it can be one of the most challenging things to actually record that and to write some minutes to say what has been agreed in that meeting, and also to know exactly what to record when there's been lots of chat and lots of discussion as well. So a few things that you may feel is a little bit nervous about getting it right. You may feel that you are really, really passionate about something, but you can't talk about it because you need to be recording everything that's being discussed, and that you're not actually part of the meeting. So these are a number of the problems that can take place. So we've got some tips for minute taking. The first thing is, if the meeting is well run and planned, then it can basically make taking minutes a lot easier, and you can actually set up sections in advance on a document so that you can actually type up the particular minutes for that section in advance. And it's the chair's job to keep that meeting in order, and they'll need the cooperation of everybody to do that. We've talked already about the importance of having that clear agenda. You can have some meeting guidelines where people who are coming along will actually abide by certain sort of rules for your meetings, such as if you want to talk, you put your hand up, or that if conversations go off on a tangent, that you have a park board that you can come back to, people not talking amongst themselves or interrupting each other. And again, one of the documents that's really useful for that is a code of conduct for the forum, which we've discussed earlier in this session. And also, as a secretary, you're well within your rights to actually point out that you can't take the minutes because everyone's talking at once and they're not following the agenda. And if you feel that a decision has been made but you're not really sure what the decision is or what you need to record, at that point in the meeting you can actually ask the chair to clarify it. And what you'll find is that actually it's probably useful for the rest of the committee as well to have that clarification from the chair. And as a result, it's often useful for the minute taker to sit next to the chair in a meeting as well. So it's useful to discuss the agenda with the chair in advance of the meeting so that you know what the meeting is going to be about. And also, once you've written the minutes, to go through them with the chair, because sometimes it may be that the chair has interpreted something differently to you, or says that actually that needs to be prioritised more in the minutes. And what you might find as well that's helpful, and a lot of minute takers do this, is to actually record the meeting. We can pretty much all do that on our mobile phones these days. You don't need any specialist equipment. But it's important, if you do that, then you have permission from everybody who's in the room, that they know that you're recording that meeting. It does go with the job that if you're concentrating on taking minutes, it limits how much you can join in the meeting. So if there's something where you particularly want to be involved in the discussion, you could actually ask somebody else in the room to take the minutes just for that item. And the last things really is it's really important to commit the time to present and develop the minutes afterwards. I've taken minutes at meetings and I find that it actually takes as long, if not longer, than the meeting itself to type up the minutes afterwards. So if it's a 2-hour meeting, you need to allocate at least 2 hours really to type up the minutes afterwards. And don't worry if your minutes aren't perfect. They're going to be discussed at the next committee meeting anyway, and they can be amended before they're signed off.
And the secretary is not, doesn't have to be somebody that knows everything that's going on, bearing in mind that you might have several different people on the committee who are talking about meetings that they've been to, and actually you haven't a clue what these meetings are about because it's just out of your area of expertise. So don't be afraid to ask, and also to perhaps come back to the person that was talking about that particular area at the end of the meeting to clarify points if you need to.
And one of the other things that we did at HPCN was where people were coming and presenting back on particular projects, we actually would ask them to prepare a number of bullet points that they would bring along, which would be how they would present their feedback, but then they would actually email those bullet points across to the minute taker so that she had that information as well, that she could cut and paste into the minutes. So other roles and responsibilities, really as part of your annual planning, it's important to look at what are you going to need for the year ahead. Speak to your existing role holders. What's working? What's not working? Is that role of secretary manageable? Do you need to split it into other roles? Is there any point having an events coordinator if you're not running any events, for instance? And also be proactive. What we've found is that sometimes, especially if your forum is running really well and it seems to be going like clockwork, people don't put themselves forward to help because they don't think anything needs to be done. So it's often that you actually can benefit from going up to people and saying, we're looking for somebody to do this. And we have always found that if you go and say, we're looking for somebody to do this particular piece of work or somebody to do this particular role, then it's easier than just putting out a message saying we need more help, because people don't really know then what that help is, and it can be quite off-putting, particularly if they do have a chair that's doing lots of work and is seen to be very busy.
I also I think it's really important as the chair to understand that we all go through journeys in our life with our children, and therefore there are times when we can give more time and there are times when we need to step back, and you need to be aware of that with people as well as they're moving through their journey.
And not all responsibilities require a position on the committee. We did mention this earlier. You can delegate responsibility or seek volunteers for particular things without them being on the committee, but they can be as useful as committee members. Certainly in Hampshire we have area representatives who can be a contact for the particular geographical area. You can have somebody who's not on the committee but offers to write a monthly newsletter or look after your social media. Recruiting and managing volunteers can take a lot of time and energy, and again it can be, often it's left to the chair, but it should really be a committee-wide responsibility to do that. So it's important that everybody does understand their role and how it fits with the forum's work, and one of the things that we'd suggest is developing an induction pack and also a process so that people can actually be supported as they start getting involved with the committee. And you may decide that as part of that you want to introduce a buddying system where they're partnered up with a more experienced committee member, and you may also want to outline a training programme. So for instance you may say this particular training that everybody needs to go on within the first 6 months or the first year. And there's lots and lots of support and training that's available to you, and after this session Contact Family and myself are going to pull together a fact sheet for you with information about organisations that you can contact. But Contact Family obviously offer lots of training and lots of support, but there are also local voluntary sector organisations that can help, and they often put on subsidised training for local voluntary organisations, so for things such as chairing meetings or finance for small charities and those sorts of things. And also, as we've already mentioned, other forums can help you as well. And it may be that a treasurer in a local forum would be happy to support your treasurer if you have somebody new, and outgoing committee members as well. These are some items that potentially could go into an induction pack. Don't need to read through them, and they're all pretty self-explanatory, I think. And succession planning. We've already talked a little bit about this. This is vital to the long-term success of a forum. At all times you need to be thinking ahead and planning ahead to make sure that your organisation is sustainable. And we certainly found in Hampshire that they were concerned that if 1 or 2 key people were to leave the organisation, they weren't sure where the organisation was going to be going after that, because they couldn't necessarily see other people waiting to take on those roles. So as part of that, it's important to have discussions with your committee members to see what are their plans, how long do they plan to stay involved with the forum for. Some people may just want to do something for a year or 2, others may be looking to stick around for a lot longer. And also it's about proactively going out and seeking new committee members, or proactively approaching existing committee members and asking them whether they can step up into other roles. And certainly that's what I did with Gail, and I persuaded her over a glass of wine or 2 that she would be the ideal person to take over from me as chair. But then we spent a good 6 to 9 months working together before we got to the place where she then took that role over. And we also worked together with the local authority, so they knew that that succession planning was in place and the training and support that was going to be there. And as it's put here, job sharing during that handover period is really useful.
I think what's also important is to recognise that people do things differently, and one of the good things about myself and Sharon's relationship was that Sharon recognised I was going to do things differently, and when she felt that I was in a good place, she did step back, and that for me meant that I then had the freedom to do things the way I wanted to, but I'd learnt all the ins and outs beforehand before I then took over that mantle, really. So it was a really good way to work together, and it's just being open and honest with each other as well, really.
It's really important that if, particularly with the role of chair, if somebody's taken over that role from you, that you have that open and honest relationship, and that you can actually discuss how and when the incumbent chair is going to step away, and also what their future role may be. And what you may find is actually what you decide and what you agree and what you plan might not happen in reality. And I know certainly I had planned to stay more involved in the committee than I have done, but what I also found at the time then was that Gail and other committee members were still particularly wanting to know what my views were on something, and not necessarily taking the committee and running with it themselves. So I stepped back completely to allow Gail that space and that time to develop with her new team how they were going to take the forum forward. And now Gail has done that, I'm starting to come back and do more parent representative roles again and input on things. But I've always been there for Gail in terms of being able to offer advice and support to her, so I didn't step away completely. But succession planning is key, and I've always personally said that as soon as you go into a role, you should start planning for your exit from that role, so that you have somebody who's there to take over from you, which is how the organisation will be sustained. So, summary. Leading the forum is not just the chair's responsibility, it's the responsibility of the whole committee. And it's worth spending time and also getting professional advice to identify what the most suitable legal structure is for your forum. Every forum, it will be different, and what is right for HPCN isn't necessarily right for your forum. And then spend the time developing your governance documents and your policies, and bear in mind that these will change and they will adapt over time as your organisation changes. Look at putting together your role descriptions and your delegated responsibilities, which all need to be agreed by the whole committee, and that will ensure that the workload is shared and everybody understands what their role is and what their responsibilities are, and also what they shouldn't be doing. You're not alone. This might sound really overwhelming, having gone through this presentation, but there's lots of support and guidance available to you. Employing staff does carry lots of responsibilities, and I wouldn't want to do that personally without any professional input. So look at getting the HR advisor involved. Nothing's set in stone, everything changes. Certainly the organisation HPCN is today is very different to the one it was a year ago, and it's certainly very different to the one that it was 4 years ago. We've talked about succession planning. Don't underestimate how important that is. But working together can achieve great things, so good luck. And now we have time for questions. And I think we actually did quite well in terms of answering that and doing that presentation in an hour. Okay, so we've got a few questions have come in. We've got one here that says, what can you do if the chair makes all of the decisions and won't listen to other members? Okay, Gail.
Well, we talked about this before actually. We thought it was probably part of the governance and part of your constitution, governing documents, to have that as written into that. What happens if the chair does take over?
We've got another couple of questions here. So is there an example of a governing document for each type of organisation that could be adapted by forums? There is a template, terms of reference and constitution on the Contact Family website. Certainly I'm sure HPCN could share their governance documentation, which would be that we have got one that would be from when we were just an incorporated association, but also now we have one as a CIO.
Yeah.
But you'd have to bear in mind that obviously the detail in that is very specific to what HPCN felt was necessary. But I would contact your Contact Family Regional Advisor as well, because they probably have copies of that. Another question, we have very few people come to our meetings. Can you recommend how we can get more members? Okay.
Well, we're a huge county, Hampshire, and we have set up regional meetings around the county. We presently have 5 different areas, and we have a regional rep that runs that each meeting. And the idea is that we run the meetings, we call them get-togethers, and we offer tea and cake, and sometimes we offer them a talker or a trainer or something that they want to hear about. But what we try and do then is say, okay, we've given you that. we now want you to answer this survey, or we would like you to answer these few questions, or we'd like you to attend a focus group. But the idea is that we are then getting more parents to come along, and in some of the areas it started off with 1 or 2 parents. We now have 15 up to 20 people attending these sessions, and as we all know, the best way that parents can learn about anything is from each other. So we've grown our meetings like that, but I also think that even just 1 or 2 parents attending a meeting to start with is actually really good, and that's a start. You can't start from having 20 at a time. If you can, you're very lucky.
We went through a phase a couple of years ago with HPCN where our committee, we knew a number of committee members were wanting to step away. So we actually put on an event specifically with a view of trying to identify more people who could get involved. And we ran it as a breakfast event. There was a number of reasons for running the event as we did. The first one was that we know that quite often parents, if they go home from the school run, don't necessarily want to make the effort to go back out again, particularly in Hampshire, where it can potentially be quite a big drive to actually get to something. So we decided we were going to put on a breakfast event, so people could drop off their children at school, and then hopefully the lure of bacon rolls and pastries would encourage them to come and meet us and have a coffee with us. We also put an added incentive in there as well of saying, it was just before Easter, and we said the first 30 people who turned up would get a free Easter egg as well. We often find that food is a big incentive in terms of getting people along to things. But that meeting as well, we had information desks from other organisations locally. So there were a lot of reasons to go there, but then we had existing committee members there to talk to people as well.
And we've also offered training for our parents as well. So we've had IPSI come down and talk to us for a session, and we have got a person-centred planning session coming up in the next few months. So again, that gets more people along, and then we can tell them about our regional groups and a bit more about what we do as a trustee board now, and how we work with the local authority.
And then just finally, there is a webinar on the Contact Family website, which is called Building Active Member Involvement, and you may want to have a look at that too. Okay, we've got a question here which I'll answer. What is the committee role for health and safety person? One of the reasons that we developed this role was because we had an office, and one of our committee members had previous knowledge and experience about all of the health and safety regulations that we would need to put in place when employing members of staff, and also having an office space that volunteers would go to. So the health and safety person who we appointed on the committee was somebody who was responsible for developing the health and safety policy that then the committee was signing off, but also there to monitor the effectiveness of it, and also to undertake any risk assessments for any new activity at all. So if we were doing an event, then there would need to be a risk assessment for that, and just basically monitoring how well we were meeting our legal responsibilities and obligations for health and safety. Okay, got any more? Okay, I'm going to give this one to Gail because she's an existing chair. We've got a couple of members of the steering group who always moan and talk about their own situation, and they don't contribute to the work of the forum. What can we do to get them to do something more constructive towards the forum and be more positive?
Thanks for that one, Sharon. This is always a difficult one, and there are always people who come with their own agenda. As the chair, it is managing it. It is trying to bring the conversation back to the agenda. It's subtly having to ask people perhaps to leave their questions and their problems to the end of the meeting, and maybe you can then address them at a later time. It's not an easy thing, and you're going to have those parents that are going to do that, but this is a bigger issue. The parent care forums are about bigger issues. They're not about the own personal situations of individuals, and it is a matter of actually trying very hard to manage those individuals. It's not easy.
Okay, and then the last question, unless any more come through to us. We're not a registered charity. We haven't had an AGM for over 2 years. Most of our group don't think it's necessary and see it as a waste of time, as nobody ever wants to be voted onto the committee. What can I do? I think I would be sharing with them the slide that was in this presentation about the risks that there are to be in an unincorporated association, and the fact that people will be personally liable for any money, and also the activities that the forum is doing. There are reasons why it's important to have governance in place to basically protect the parents that are involved with the forum. So I would just be highlighting to them actually how important it is for the forum members to actually be protected. The other thing you may want to do is talk to your local authority as well. If you have a friendly contact there who then might be willing to come and say to the forum, we're concerned about the fact that you don't have a legal structure, and they may come and say, could you demonstrate to us how you're actually representative of the voice of that wider group, and what is your mandate in terms of being elected to speak on behalf of parents in our local authority area. We certainly have found that it was quite a powerful message to us in the very, very early days of our forum, and it made us think, actually, if they're questioning whether we have a legitimate right to talk on behalf of parents locally, we need to make sure that we show that we do have that legitimate right, and that we've had elections and we've been elected by parents in our county to represent them. So that's another route in, possibly. Okay, I think that's all the questions that we have got. So we'd like to say thank you for listening in. We hope there's people out there. It's very strange talking into a laptop screen and not knowing if there's people still out there listening to us. So I'd like to say thank you to Gail for coming and joining me today.
It's been a pleasure, absolute pleasure, and I hope it's been useful. But just remember, there's no right way. Everybody does it differently.
Thank you.